Good evening. Welcome to the fourth, are we on here? Welcome to the fourth, it's not picking up though. Welcome to the fourth of five celebrations of our 200th anniversary as the Presbyterian Church of Cadiz. Note a couple of things. First of all, this pulpit, the story of which is that as Grace United Presbyterian Church burned, two brave souls ran in and grabbed the pulpit and carried it out to save it. So here it is with us. And also, this is the era when the two churches joined together in 1967. Well, we haven't quite, we kind of gotten there, I guess. But it also means this is the era when we get the church organ. Now, I saw pictures where the console used to be over here. Do y'all remember that? Anybody remember that? It was moved after the roof fell, which was 1950-something, 40-something. 54, yeah. You see the picture that was moved after that. But Paul is going to play in kind of in honor of this era of our time when the organ came into our worship. So, Maestro. radical reformer Zwingli was a great church musician, and he was so radical that he decided that he would dismantle his church's organ lest they fall into the sin of idolatry and simply worshiping the music. But you can hear how it could be tempting to just worship the music from that. The less radical reformers believed, no, that the music helped us actually come closer to God. And you can see that too. Thank you, Paul. Lest it get overlooked in our final celebration on October 1st, I want to say thank you to the folks who have been part of this anniversary committee for over a year. Sandra Jones, you know, has worked tirelessly to make sure that we've had food. And Chuck Yoho and John Kirkland have been wonderful on this committee. And Scott Pendleton has written all of these wonderful historical inserts that are fantastic. And Virginia McFarland has looked over his shoulder to make sure he did them right. And then there's Pam. And Pam Gibson has been the wonderful cheerleader for this and has kept us faithful and encouraged. And she has these wonderful, wonderful readings from her grandmother. Two characters, I think. So Pam, thank you, and we're looking forward to what you have to say to us tonight.
I guess Bill had a stool, but I think I can do without it. It's over there. Good evening. I hope that you enjoy this as much as I enjoyed putting this together. A few of you here this evening might remember the tiny lady, the one next to whom I even felt large, who always sat on that side of the pew, or that side of the church, in what she referred to as the Dickerson pew. From the late 1800s until the early 1980s, she faithfully sat there along with family members over the years who spanned 6 generations. Isabele Ronsheim, my mom, left her legacy in many ways, but one she left on paper, allowing me to share bits and pieces of her personal history of this, her church. Her earliest recollections of church were put onto paper when she was past her 80th birthday, and are part of her story of growing up in Cadiz from 1894 to approximately 1912. The bulk of her memories, though, comes from her yearly diaries she kept from her teenage years until 1982, a year before her death. Her earliest diaries are mostly filled with the comings and goings of a teenager and her friends, the lives of the 5 babies that arrived between 1921 and 1931 were the main focus of that decade. But from 1932 through 1982, she found time to record a broader view of the world. I tried to choose entries that not only capture the life of the church, but also give an idea of other events, local and otherwise. Sometimes the dates aren't exact because frequently she mentions how far behind she is and that she's catching up. Wednesday, January 1st, 1936. I'm glad to put away an old year, but somehow I hate to start a new one. I'm afraid to philosophize or to speculate on the future. My faith is so weak, so often I seem to yearn for only one answer. Sunday, June 12th, 1938. Children's Day 1938 is over. Mabel Johnson's baby cried all during the primary exercises, and you couldn't hear anything much but it. The children looked darling, but so much confusion spoiled their performance. Sunday, September 3rd, 1939. About 10 a.m., it was announced on the radio that England and France had received no answer from Hitler, Hence, there was a war existing between them. Roosevelt gave a reassuring talk about 9, and then about 10, we heard that a British liner had been torpedoed, over 300 American passengers. Sunday, September 1st, 1940. Reverend Lippincott is preaching about the Jewish situation in America. There is an undercurrent of malicious Jewish propaganda. Sunday, September 8th, 1940, a day of prayer for peace, but Reverend Lippincott passed it lightly by. Sunday, September 15th, 1940, a beautiful day. Sunday school and church. My Brownies beat the Yankees twice today. It is surely a tight American League race. A disturbing broadcast from London, and things are too dreadful to follow. Thursday, October 24th, 1940. Tearing down our church tower. The congregation is trying to raise $5,000. The Lippincotts gave $600, the Allens $200, Clifford's $150. There have to be gifts like that to raise the money. Sunday, November 24th, 1940. We were all at church, and the new steeple is beautiful. The boys drove to Denison in 26 minutes. Friday, November 29th, 1940, a terrible accident at the Nelms mine. 30 to 33 men killed. The telephone began to ring, and Milton began to take pictures, print pictures, and help the various newsmen who were here, the Columbus Dispatch, Hearst Wire, and the Associated Press. Sunday, December 29th, 1940, Sunday school and church, but very few were there. Roosevelt's speech on the radio. He pulled no punches and left no doubt where and how he stood. At the conclusion, he named those who were there, including Mr. and Mrs. Clark Gable. Monday, November 10th, 1941, a most embarrassing discussion tonight at the Guild meeting. We voted on chimes, 14 yes, 8 no, and some not voting. Some very pointed remarks were made which Mrs. Lippincott could have taken personally as far as Reverend Lippincott is concerned. Sunday, December 7th, 1941, the 7th of December. Japan has attacked Pearl Harbor, Guam, and later in the evening, Manila. It came as a shocking surprise after peace negotiations were still in progress. At first, we thought it was a joke, but only too soon was it verified. Bob Patterson is in Pearl Harbor. The radio was on constantly, and even Rich was affected and interested. Thursday, January 1st, 1942, a new unwritten diary for a year which may be fraught with more change than any we have yet experienced. Bitter, hard change, too. Sunday, March 8th, 1942. No church for Robert, Sam, Milton, or me. It might be our family's last Sunday together for some time. Monday, March 9th, 1942. It's Sam's 19th birthday. These days, your birthday has a fatal meaning. Monday, December 14th, 1942, a guild meeting tonight. There was a discussion that we give so much to the Japanese interred children for their Christmas, but there was so much dissension, I didn't even put it to a vote. Saturday, February 5th, 1944, at 11 o'clock, the fire alarm rang. It was the United Presbyterian Church which was ablaze. There was a strong south wind, and in an hour's time, the second floor was gone. Sparks and cinders blew up the street like a snow blizzard. All buildings up the street were guarded the rest of the night and beyond. Sunday, February 6, 1944. I went to Sunday school and viewed the ruins of the church. Sunday, March 12, 1944. Charles Henry is dead, killed in a plane accident on March 7th in England. It seems inconceivable that he's gone. Everyone had wondered and worried about how much he should be told of his mother's condition. Went to Guild in the evening, where we discussed racial prejudice and juvenile delinquency. Sunday, March 19th, 1944. Reverend Lippincott gave a little talk honoring Charles Henry. He's the first gold star in our church flag. Sunday, June 11th, 1944, a beautiful day, and with the exception of my mistakes and those of Lippincott in the flat singing, everything went off very well at Children's Day. 2 from Harrison County lost in 3 days. Sunday, October 1st, 1944, a lovely day, worldwide communion. I'm wondering if Sam out on the wide sea participated. He must now be at least 2,500 miles away. And speaking of communion, there we were, from Boston on the Atlantic out to the Pacific, through Indiana and Ohio, all in one communion. I made fudge for Sam's Christmas box. It was just as he liked it, firm and smooth. I never enjoyed making Christmas candy more. Sunday, January 6, 1945. I never saw more glistening snow. Venus is the evening star, and it's easy to believe in the Star of Bethlehem when we see it glowing in the western sky. Thursday, April 12, 1945. What a sad day. Mary couldn't believe what her father told her, and neither could I. Even now, when I'm writing this, it seems unbelievable that FDR is dead. Tuesday, March 8, 1945. It came at 9 o'clock from Truman and Churchill. Stalin had delayed it until tonight after the formal surrender in Berlin. School was let out. We had union services at the Presbyterian Church. Milton read Harrison County's honor roll, and Rich played taps beautifully. Thursday, April 18th, 1946. Candlelight communion service, and Milton, Mack, and Nately came back into the Cadiz Presbyterian Church. The Tiffany window had floodlights put behind it, and it's glorious. Friday, April 19th, 1946, Reverend Lippincott resigned to take effect the first of the year. Sunday, June 2nd, 1946. Children's Day looms, and we can't have much. No children, no speeches, no help. Sunday, January 19th, 1947. To church to hear Reverend McEnroy, who made a good impression, one which would wear well. And Earl Young played the organ, Dorothy Beetham's husband, and on me he made a good impression. Monday, February 24th, 1947. The parsonage is getting fixed up beautifully. New toilet, electric stove, refrigerator, washer, new bathtub, paint, paper, and the basement cemented. Tuesday, November 25th, 1947. Lots of arguments and fights over this hayride the youth fellowship is having, foods, wagons, etc. Wally Philippi and John Hanna were here in the evening for the discussion. Monday, March 8th, 1948. A guild meeting, and it was a good one. The Supreme Court, with only one dissenting vote, gave a decision saying it was unlawful to teach the Bible in a public school. Monday, January 10th, 1949. I went to Guild. We gave enough money to the church's quota for benevolence as was needed to make up the deficit we had this year. That amounted to about $400, but we have the money. Sunday, April 24th, 1949, the UP cornerstone was laid today at 3. Sunday, October 30th, 1949, the organ was dedicated, and tonight we went to a recital given by the head of Carnegie Tech, who demonstrated its beauty and power very well. Sunday, July 2nd, 1950. Oh dear, I always wish Sundays were 2 days long. Joan Davis talked. Our church is giving $1,000 on her salary, and she's to be a missionary to Japan. Friday, November 24th, 1950. We awakened to find the ground covered with snow and more coming. All day long it snowed. Buses were stopped. Scouts went around collecting cots and bedclothes. Reverend McEnroy opened our church, and the Red Cross got Pearl Johnson to cook. Saturday, November 25th, 1950. I'm a day ahead. It was today that our church was opened. Around 50 to 60 people slept at the church. The UPs looked after a busload, but none slept there. And in the evening, the family played patience and had a discussion on original sin. Wednesday, January 17th, 1951. I went to prayer circle. Mrs. McEnroy is interested in faith healing. I don't know. There is such a delicate line there. Mental healing has its place in the spiritual world or science, but physical healing, I just can't say. Wednesday, January 30th, 1952. As I walked by the United Presbyterian Church today, I thought what a lovely building it is. They should have a lot of satisfaction in its beauty and dignity. Sunday, April 6, 1952. The church looked lovely. The new brass vases and cross, and two of the smaller candelabra were there, 2 floor candelabra to come. Alan and Bess had given 2 lovely bouquets of white calla lilies and snapdragons in memory of Blanche and her husband. Friday, April 25th, 1952. I went to see the interior of the UP church this afternoon as I was coming home from a library board meeting. It's lovely, dignified, and impressive, and certainly conducive to worship. Monday, September 1st, 1952. Out to see Olive Given. She leaves for Mexico tomorrow. The week's festivities for the UP church dedication have begun. Open house tonight, and tomorrow a history pageant. Tuesday, January 13th, 1953. Mr. Raber had a meeting of the Sunday school teachers. Sunday school's at a low ebb. Attendance is poor. What to do? Who knows? Thursday, July 23rd, 1953. I went to McEnroy's for a planning meeting. He's a very discouraged pastor. Wednesday, July 14th, 1954. A hot, hot day. Got home to get a call from Mary, and while I was talking, the storm broke. The roof was blown off our church. Debris, stone, bricks, wood, everything fell on top of the altar and the organ. Even the downstairs was covered, but our oak trees stood. Sunday, September 19th, 1954. Church is still at the schoolhouse. Sunday, December 12th, 1954. A lovely winter day. Church upstairs for the first time since the storm, and it was so good to be back. Sunday, March 27th, 1955. Rededication of the church today. Thursday, March 15th, 1956. The most beautiful crescent moon tonight, and right above it, Venus. Oh, what a beautiful sight, one to lift the heart. Friday, March 8th, 1957. I went to the World Day of Prayer service of the Church of God. So few were there, but what comments about Reverend McEnroy's sermon last night at the UP Church. Inspired was what everybody said. Wednesday, January 8th, 1958. After 3 ballots, Trinity United Presbyterian Church was named. Much discussion, very little acrimony. Sunday, January 26, 1958. Reverend McEnroy told the congregation he was leaving and rehearsed his years here. Some felt pretty sorry. All were sorry, but felt it was a good move for him. No, not all. Sunday, May 4th, 1958. The pulpit committee voted to ask Reverend Miller to preach on the 25th. They had gone to Starkdale Presbyterian Church to hear a prospective candidate, a retired Army chaplain. Sunday, May 25th, 1958. Mrs. Jenkins, the wife of the candidate, was in our class, and I had a miserably haphazard lesson. Reverend Jenkins preached, and I felt, as did most of the congregation, a little lukewarm. There were lots of distractions. The loudspeaker wasn't working, and then there were at least 3 small children who were noisy. Monday, May 26, 1958, a congregational meeting, and only 80 were there. The vote was 65 yes, 12 no, and 3 blank. Wednesday, July 23, 1958. the congregational meeting to decide whether the manse will be sold. I didn't go. A large group at the dinner and about 100 at the meeting afterwards. 22 voted against the sale, but no one spoke up until it was all over. I would have voted no, I suspect. Tuesday, August 17, 1959, the manse is sold for $10,500, and I'm sorry. Sunday, August 13, 1961, a beautiful day. Dick Sinclair preached and the church was full. Many were there to see Reverend Elgin, who gave the benediction. It was Dick's first service from that pulpit in the 11 years since he'd been ordained. He did a good job, free and relaxed, and his sermon had meat in it. Even Robert wasn't too critical. The congregation's enthusiasm was high and catching. Wednesday, May 8, 1963, congregational dinner. They discussed the Constitution and threatened to get bogged down on the duties of a congregation here or elsewhere. The method of choosing a committee for minister replacement was a stumbling block, and there was a big ruckus over the junior choir. Sunday, July 21st, 1963. I do like the hymns played by the chimes, especially Holy, 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 even if they are electronic. Monday, September 16, 1963. Circles met tonight. A bad situation in Birmingham yesterday. A black church was bombed. How terrible. I get angry with my Sunday school class for saying communism is such a threat. Sunday, January 31st, 1965. I thought I'd list the members of my Sunday school class. Ada Clark, Elsie Smith, Catherine Mills, Marlene Harmon, Mrs. Jenkins, Rachel Frew, Beth Dickey, Helen McFadden, Mrs. Dye, Mrs. Clare, and Dolores Sullivan. Mrs. Kirkpatrick died the past year, and Mrs. Easton is seldom there because of her health. Wednesday, March 24th, 1965. I went to the Lenten service at Drummond. The sanctuary of the Methodist Church is really beautiful. My little crocuses won't come into full bloom, I'm afraid. Too much weather, and they look completely disheartened. Tuesday, April 27, 1965. The Galeys are leaving on June 1st. Friday, April 30th, 1965. What a busy and rather confused month. A month of rejects, of indecision, of doubt and experiment in foreign policy, the war in Vietnam, and here the county school board and the Cadiz school board can't agree on consolidation. Both feel the other is grabbing, and the county distrusts Cadiz, as is the history of the county. And as of now, there will be no consolidation. Wednesday, June 9th, 1965, the sessions of Grace and Trinity met tonight to discuss joining forces, and I guess they voted unanimously to do so. Sunday, October 31st, 1965, the congregation voted to join with Grace on a year's trial, 98-14, and one impartial. Grace voted earlier, about the same percentage. Sunday, December 5th, 1965, our first joint church service and a very good attendance. Milton Mack and Turner Mills talked to Jenkins about his military attitudes. He was very gracious and conciliatory. Sunday, November 20th, 1966, at 3, Trinity and Grace held separate congregational meetings, and each voted by a 2/3 vote and more to merge. Doug had a nice talk on behalf of the Youth Fellowship. Sunday, January 29th, 1967, our presbytery, Zanesville, voted on the new Westminster Confession yesterday. There are disputes on many points, and it's really the same division as in politics, and conservative politics is back to some of the attitudes. Sunday, March 5th, 1967. Trinity is painted all over, and the smell of paint hangs heavenly. And we went to the installation service for Reverend Jenkins of the United Presbyterian Church of Cadiz. Thursday, February 29th, 1968. The dissenters of war, especially among the college groups, are getting louder. Tonight, though, I read in A Christianity in Crisis, who can say what's right and what's wrong? Doubts, and from doubts grow fears. Milton took a picture of an awfully nice young chap from Germano who was dreadfully wounded. He's home for 25 days. Wednesday, September 25th, 1968. We're to move back to Trinity next week, and I guess some of the class isn't satisfied as to the location. Location can mean two things. The church is divided and not in very good shape. Lots of sentiment against Jenkins. Sunday, December 8th, 1968. My reservations are gone. I like Reverend Thomas very much, and all the congregation, about 130, approved. There were 3 no votes. Some might not have voted out of loyalty for Reverend Jenkins, but he seemed pleased. Sunday, February 23rd, 1969. Thomas preached a good sermon, one which was pretty sobering, what we should have been doing and left undone, and the idea of 2 buildings was unwise and a symbol of disunity. Sunday, March 30th, 1969. The crowd was large and the music in fine tempo. Reverend Thomas had suggested stepping it up. How much difference one man can make in attendance, feeling, and attitudes. Wednesday, April 9th, 1969. A trustee session meeting. The church buildings were the issue. A heated argument both at church and here at home, although we were more of one accord. They appointed a committee, I guess, to look into the problems. Everyone is afraid to face the issue, and as always, there are 2 sides. Good reasons for both positions. Sunday, August 9th, 1970. The decision was made for the sale of Grace, also one not to remodel. The meeting lasted until 10:30, and the UPs made a last stand. John Mitchell made a fervent plea, as did Martha Haverfield. It wasn't too bitter a meeting, frank and honest. The meetings of minds should have occurred when the merger was inaugurated. Sunday, September 27th, 1970. Pittsburgh won the National League pennant. A nice church service. 9 adults joined, the first time no young people, and all adults in years. Sunday, January 10th, 1971. A lovely day. Got into the strip mining angle. My Sunday school class is, well, let's say conservative, and I'm on the way to be regarded as a heretic. Sunday, May 2nd, 1971. Some little drops of rain. Some UPs conspicuous because of their absence. Reconciliation will be needed and a sympathetic and understanding heart, but it can't all be on one side. Wednesday, September 8th, 1971. I spent the morning looking over the circle study I had, a verse from Ecclesiastes, a time to hope, a time to despair. Didn't touch on what I should have, the current scene of political and secular affairs. I'm so sorry I've left out the social scene, the haircuts on both men and women, the racial disturbances, the pollution problem. What kind of diary have I kept? Tuesday, January 4th, 1972. A special Presbyterian meeting expecting to learn how any unexpected legal problems might be handled, but instead it was all on Angela Davis. The ministers were still upset about that. Friday, October 27th, 1972. Had a surprise today. Anna Miner called to ask me if I would serve on session. I couldn't reply without some thought. I'm not a young woman, nor for that matter, a middle-aged woman. Sunday, January 7th, 1973. Met with Mr. Thomas and the others who have been named church officers. I was nervous, but I'm proud and glad I said I would serve. John McNabb, a high school senior, was ordained as an elder too. He's very nice and thoughtful. I hope my age will be balanced by his youth and vice versa. Sunday, October 14th, 1973. Mr. Thomas had a fine sermon on the state of national affairs. He made no excuses for Watergate or Agnew, but felt the whole moral climate of the U.S. was bad. Basically, we're all to blame. Sunday, October 21st, 1973. Mr. Thomas has been criticized for his sermon last week. Wednesday, June 4th, 1975. The women who had protested serving dinners to make money were heard, and the wean showed what the money earned was used for. Thursday, March 11th, 1976, Milton Mack dropped a bombshell. Reverend Thomas is leaving in June, going to a large congregation in St. Louis. I am sorry and feel he shouldn't go yet. Sunday, July 4th, 1976. Mr. Hayward, as he wants to be called, and his wife have arrived. I like him, and so did the rest of the congregation. Tuesday, August 17th, 1976. Do you know what will embarrass readers of this diary 20 to 25 years from now? Is what is related in these few pages. An absolute lack of any of the fearful events going on. Earthquakes, tidal waves, volcanoes. Thousands have died, been made homeless in the past few months. Race riots in South Africa. Hundreds have died in Lebanon versus Palestine in Northern Ireland. Sunday, June 5th, 1977. I guess the pulpit committee has united on a choice. It's been so long. Sunday, June 26, 1977. Reverend Hudson preached a very good sermon, and he pleased everyone. I feel he has a good sense of humor, and we're going to buy a house for the manse. Sunday, August 10th, 1980. All these blank pages make me sorry. I have been to church, but no Sunday school for 2 months. Sunday, May 10th, 1981. Didn't go to church, or did I? I'm writing this late. I did go. I do so like Reverend Hudson. And that was, she had very few entries in this last couple years, but I want to close with my favorite piece that she wrote about the church, and this is what she put down on paper when she was past her 80th birthday. And it's what sitting in the sanctuary as a little girl meant to her. There were 4 church congregations in Cadiz: a Methodist Episcopal, a Presbyterian, a United Presbyterian, and an AME Methodist. As I have said, my grandfather McConnell was a Methodist pastor here for several years. The McConnells were Methodist, while the Dickersons were Scotch Presbyterians. Both were true to their church affiliations, but my father spent his Sundays on bird walks and showed no inclination to do otherwise, married or not. So my mother kept her membership in the Presbyterian Church. I would go with her as a little girl and sit in number 10, the Dickerson pew, with Grandpa and Grandma Dickerson, both of whom had their own ideas on church propriety. I would sit with dangling feet and look at the really lovely church windows, which harmonized with the really lovely organ music, making a real church service for me. The organ was a fine instrument, donated by Andrew Carnegie, and my aunt, the organist, was a fine musician. I looked at the stained glass windows reaching to the high ceiling and tried to decide which was the prettiest, the yellow with mingled brown and green, the one predominantly a soft yellow, the lavender and red, or the red and green. They are gorgeous windows, and I think so yet. Each Sunday, one would appeal to me more than the other. Back at the pulpit was a Tiffany memorial window, the gift of a generous family. The white-clothed figure of Christ, soldiers blinded by his glory, fallen at his feet, Easter morning, with the figures of 2 Marys on one side and John and perhaps Peter on the other, all in radiant color, were the central group. Who could find a more revealing sermon than that to a child's mind? Thank you.
I think you do. People have trouble getting it. Yeah.
So a few inaccuracies have slipped into my narrative, including a misspelling of Isabel. She didn't spell it E-L-L-E, she spelled it E-L. Nothing. And I've got ELE, so I had the right number of L's, but one too many E's, which we'll fix. We're going to put this together as kind of a little booklet, we hope, for the end. And I also missed one of our war dead that you mentioned tonight that I did not have listed here. So, but the most important part is the bold at the very end. It says, if I could get the reader to do one thing while we reflect on our history, it would be to please write down your memories, the good, the colorful, and even, yes, the bad, about this church and the events you have lived through. As much as I can research history, nothing replaces a first-hand account of it by those who were there, as Pam's reading of her grandmother's diaries has shown us tonight. I really implore you to write down your memories. I don't know how to break this to you, but you're not going to be here forever. Eventually, you're going to head to the church triumphant, and when you do, all those memories that what makes the body, this body of Christ, who it is, will be gone. So I have interviewed Mary, and I've enjoyed it, and I've written a lot down about her. And I think you guys need to do that because you have a lot of good memories of this church. I can see listening to her talk about the UP, and when we went together with the UP, how traumatic it was, and I told a little story in there. And that might have been Haverfield. I don't know. She sat right where Ted's sitting. That's all I know for sure. She was about this tall. And I said to, and I did say, I said, am I sitting in your pew? And she said, I am a UPer. I had really no idea what that meant. I'd been coming to the church about a month. Felt very warm in this church, very welcoming. And, but now I understand, that was a traumatic experience. And you never escape the church of your youth, or you never forget the church of your youth. There's part of me that is very Episcopalian and misses the incense and misses the high church. So please write down your memories. If you see any glaring inaccuracies, I'd love to know about them. And someday in my retirement, I'm going to write a book. But that day's not today.
Someday in my retirement, I'll read a book. Where's Bob? Bob Holloway? What are we doing on October 1st? Do y'all know that Bob missed golf today because he thought we were having a lunch after worship? October 1st is the culmination of these celebrations of our 200th anniversary. We will have worship here at 11 o'clock. Please do not come expecting worship to be 59 minutes and 30 seconds. It might be a little longer. The Reverend Doug Ronsheim will be here to preach. The Reverend Alan Jeffries will share in the administration of the Sacrament of Holy Communion. And we will, after that, have a catered meal downstairs. Don't go golfing that day. We are already receiving RSVPs for the meal, so if you want to do that, please let the church office know. Sandra Jones, in her infinite wisdom, has found a caterer for $10. So the meal will be $10, which was much better than the $22.50 or something that the other folks wanted to have. So we'll take your reservations for that. Also, most of you have gotten a letter, I think, about the upcoming events. We have started an anniversary fund, proceeds for which will be used to purchase new hymnals and also to do some sprucing up around here. And we are hoping to rededicate the multi-purpose room in the fellowship hall as the Bill and Betty Hudson room. The carpet's coming next week, I believe. So those are opportunities for you to celebrate with us. We already have one RSVP, and it's somebody coming all the way from Cincinnati. So we're hoping to fill this space up on October 1st. So please make every effort to join us then. Our closing hymn tonight is number 420. It's called God of Grace and God of Glory. God of Grace and God of Glory was written by Henry Emerson Fosdick. If you don't know who he was a hotshot Baptist preacher who caught the eye of one John Rockefeller. John Rockefeller wanted Fosdick to go and be the pastor at the Park Avenue, you know, like in the Monopoly game, Park Avenue, the Park Avenue Baptist Church. And Fosdick thought that the Park Avenue Baptist Church was too, as he said, swank for his tastes. And so he refused. And so John Rockefeller gave the money to start what is now the Riverside Church in New York City, which is closer to Harlem and in a little less swank district. Emerson Fosdick was a grand proponent of the social gospel, which is where we come to in terms of our theology at this phase that we've entered into tonight. If you'll recall, we had a time when there was a lot of insistence on personal piety. And then we went to a time where there was a lot of insistence on taking the gospel out into the world. We had the missionary movement. Now we have a movement where, having taken the gospel out into the world and seen what's out there, that there's a social gospel movement where people are saying, before people can receive the good news of the gospel, you've got to make sure that they're fed and clothed and housed and taken care of. And Emerson Fosdick, that was his shtick. And he writes this hymn, God of Grace and God of Glory, as a prayer to be sung at the opening processional of the Riverside Church. And the joke about this hymn is, you know, it says, grant us wisdom and courage for the facing of this hour. And it's always an opening hymn in worship. So you always think the facing of this hour is the 11 o'clock church service, right? But that's not what he was talking about. He was talking about they knew they were entering a time of world war. And so it's a prayer for God to enter into the world's activities and give the people of God wisdom and courage, lest we fail not God or human beings. So let's sing together, if you would, a hymn from this era, hymn number 420, God of Grace and God of Glory. And this one needs you to stand, I think.
Thank
remember that we've only had half a pound of lard so far. The other half is waiting for us downstairs. We have desserts waiting and time for fellowship. And West Virginia kicked off about 15 minutes ago, so we don't have to stay long. But as you go from here, may the love of God, the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you now and forevermore. Amen.